At Gamescom over the last few days, we actually got a lot less than I expected to get. Not even a release date, but between the third trailer and the gameplay demos, there is still plenty to sink your teeth into when it comes to Monster Hunter. In addition to the Windward Plains, we now get to see the Scarlet Forest, this game's forest biome, whose distinctive feature is a mysterious red water. This red water is likely to come from the red silk of the new monster, Lala Barina, a new Temnoceran whose mandible arms have developed massive claws, and whose bum, presumably containing the silk, opens up to look like a blooming rose. In addition to its silk, it seems to be able to make some kind of dust that inflicts sleep. On top of the new locale, we get a quick look at the village, or at least the one we'll have in the Windward Plains, and a few glimpses at the new characters, before seeing another new monster, Ray Dow. Turns out, it wasn't a Thor Magala, but a Rathorlos. As you can see, it behaves a lot more like your classic two-legged wyvern, rather than resembling any kind of elder dragon. From this closer look, we can also see that its horns are usually out to the side, but can be moved to point forward for its big lightning strike attacks, and it seems that these big lightning attacks can leave lightning marks in the sand, or even harden it into what you can only assume is a kind of glass rock. As for actual gameplay, we got an absolute feast of info. So much so that I don't even think I can or want to cover it all here, but to sum it up, every weapon has been granted a host of new moves. In the trailer, we can see dual blades swapping between demon and archdemon combos on the fly. We get a better look at sneak attacks, which you seem to be able to do to start off a fight with a big hit, and it seems that basically any weapon with a block can do the clash movement we first saw with the greatsword. Although, what's more of note is that it seems that every weapon now has some kind of counter, many of which are returning moves we've seen in Rise and Sunbreak, like with Switch Axe, and even Greatsword is getting one that you'll have to, or be able to, charge up beforehand. In addition, all the weapons seem to have greater mobility overall, along the lines of what we saw recently with Lance being able to sidestep while poking. It of course looks really cool, but has me a little bit concerned about what the difficulty is going to be like. But that's going to be a whole video on its own, so stay tuned. On top of this, we get to see how the village is seamless with the locale, and the return of environmental hazards to be used against the monster. Thunderbug shock traps and falling rocks are the ones I remember most easily. And of course, we get proper turf wars again. Now, all this information gets me really excited, of course. I am, of course, bursting to know more. But unfortunately, today begins what I'm calling my Monster Hunter Blackout. Shortly after me and my friends had finished with playing World Iceborne, the trailer for Rise came out. I felt the same then as I feel now, bursting at the seams. In the following years, as we waited for the PC release, I watched every trailer I could. Then again, when Sunbreak was announced, I did the same. I had a voracious hunger to play the game, but I couldn't. And so in the meantime, I was going to consume everything I could that would get me as hype as possible. But when I played Rise, when I played Sunbreak, it slowly became more and more apparent that I'd made a grave mistake. Or alternatively, I realised a big problem with Capcom. Not one single monster in these games came to me as a surprise, besides the final bosses of Ibushi, Nawa and Geismagorm, because I had watched the trailers. While I did enjoy the game, the hype I had built up fell flat in a way that it didn't with World and Iceborne, and at least 1/3 of that was because I didn't get to experience anything new. This is a known problem of Capcom. They actually did it with World and Iceborne 2, revealing every single monster in the game besides the final bosses. I just thankfully wasn't around to see those trailers, because I didn't watch anything to do with Monster Hunter at the time. And among the many issues I had with Dragon's Dogma 2, their insistence on revealing every monster and major character definitely detracted from that experience as well. We have every reason to think that they are going to do this again, and so long ago I decided I would limit how much promotional material I'd watch for the next Monster Hunter, and made a list of every Monster Hunter channel I love. From the moment Capcom began releasing a lot of information or announced the release date, I would begin the Monster Hunter Blackout, where I unsubscribe from most or all of the channels on this list and resubscribe when we've played the full game. It's gonna be hard because I love these, especially Ratatoska. I invite you to do the same. I'll also let you know that although I'll be avoiding playing Monster Hunter until Wilds, I've pre-recorded the last few Rise Sunbreak quests I missed to be used for video footage, so there will be some Monster Hunter content on this channel going forward. Please subscribe if you would like to see Monster Hunter with philosophy. Oh, and maybe like the video too, because that will help me out as well. But anyway, this channel is about gaming combined with philosophy, and so I felt like using this opportunity to philosophize about the nature of spoilers. Why do we care about them anyway? I have friends that do not care about spoilers, or at least nowhere near as much as me, who are part of my gaming group. We've not had more than a couple of issues with it, but it's really made me think about why I, or any of us, care about spoilers. Especially because of what one of my friends, let's call him N, had to say about why he doesn't. I can't remember his exact words, but I'm going to make my own version of his argument, because it'll be a great jumping off point to explain why I do care about spoilers. When we consume a piece of media, we're engaging in the suspension of disbelief, where we're effectively pretending on some level that what we are experiencing is not words on a page, pictures on a screen, or noises coming from a speaker, but in fact a real event. But we don't just pretend that things are real when they aren't. We also actively empathise with characters and take their points of view during the narrative. And this means the piece of media can make us simulate their reactions to the events of the plot, based on their perspectives and emotional dispositions. Finally, there's just an element of novelty to our enjoyment of media, where we simply enjoy new stuff happening as the story progresses. N's explanation of his experience was effectively that because we are already pretending, already empathising with the characters in a show or the main character of a game, then it makes no difference if we just do the same thing for twists in the plot of a story and take on a perspective in which they're a surprise. And then, on top of that, we don't lose any of the novelty, because it's just as novel to us whether we hear it second hand or through a trailer, as it is when we experience the show itself. He also said that he sort of experiences that novelty a second time, by imagining the standpoint of someone who didn't know that information coming into the show or game or other piece of media, and also gets to notice information he would not have noticed because of knowing the main details of events. I thought about this quite a lot, because it makes a lot of sense at face value. You can pretend for one thing, why not another? But now I know exactly why spoilers still matter to me, and may even matter to those who think it doesn't matter to them, without them realising. The key difference is context. We do not just enjoy the events of a story one by one, and we do not enjoy an encounter in a video game in isolation either. We experience them in the context of a certain amount of knowledge and ignorance about all the events that have happened up until that point, and all the events that could happen. And although I consider that to be a full explanation, I don't feel that it properly communicates the profundity of the experience you have of this. But regardless, it means that no, it's not the same experience when you get new information from a trailer, or hear it mentioned to you by a friend. It is so much different, and of course in my opinion better, to learn about, say, a new monster firsthand, because you experience the novelty differently in the context of you going into a hunt that you're going to actually have to carry out, or are currently in the process of carrying out, or are even currently experiencing in a battle. The specific experience given to you in a given moment blends and melds with the perspective you bring to it, and that creates a unique overall experience. And this goes doubly so for a certain subset of novelty, which is surprises. Surprises are when something happens that defies your knowledge of what can, could, or is likely to happen. Of course, you could experience an event that you didn't know would happen, but most of the time you do have a sense that that new event could happen. Surprises are special because they point to something most of us are looking for when we consume any kind of media. We tend to call this immersion. N was right when he said that we must pretend when watching a show or playing a game. We must mentally simulate the experiences of the characters, even though we cannot see through their eyes or hear through their ears. However, the point of most media and entertainment is precisely to make things feel as real as possible, and it is this realness that creates immersion, or at least part of it. We are more engaged the more real the story or game is to us. This is fundamentally why we all tend to prefer television and gaming to books, and why we definitely prefer them to reading the script of shows or the game design documents of games, and just imagining what they would look and sound like. When we directly experience the sights and sounds of a show, or the genuine demands of a video game, we are not pretending anymore. We may not smell or feel things when watching a show, but the sights and sounds are genuinely real to us. They are there independently of any active thinking or imagination on our own part. And so, to bring this back to the issue of surprises, I'm going to tell another story about another friend of mine who we'll call A. He too is not so bothered about spoilers, and so while we were playing Monster Hunter Rise, he even looked up the final fight with Nawa. As a result, he knew what was going to happen. Accidentally, he revealed a small thing about it just before, and we reminded him we care about spoilers, and there were no issues with this. Of course, now having been reminded, he was very deliberately going to avoid spoiling anything for any of us, and so the following was no mistake or lack of care on his part. During the fight with Nawa, Magna Marlowe enters after a certain health threshold is passed, fights Nawa and becomes rideable, which many of us would never have expected. It's meant to be an epic and positive surprise. However, right before this happened, A excitedly told us that an epic moment was coming up. This hardly ruined the experience for me, but it did completely rob me of the surprise. He was confused as to how that was a spoiler, which is understandable given he personally doesn't mind them at all. The reason it does count as a spoiler to me is very simple to explain. First of all, we've got the factor I explained earlier. It matters what context I experience things in. Being told about a surprise is not as surprising as experiencing it yourself. And second of all, this first factor is the cause of the second. I want to be actually surprised by what happens. If Magna Marlowe appears without me knowing, then that surprise is real to me. I am actually surprised rather than pretending or imagining that I would be. If someone tells you they're going to try and surprise you right before they do it, they will not succeed in surprising you most of the time. While most people don't understand why, and certainly not the explanation I just gave, most people do have some understanding that spoilers can mess up the experience. So it makes you wonder why Capcom would want to spoil its games so much. Surely, if they kept things a secret, people would enjoy their games more. The reality is that media companies are in a tough spot. They don't get the money they need just by giving the customer a good experience. No, they get the money they need solely based on how well they motivate people to buy their product. And to be motivated to do so, the customer need only believe that that product will be good. For that, they need evidence that it will be good, and the more evidence they get, the more certain people will be that they will enjoy it. Knowing this, it's easy to understand why Capcom or any other game company would be tempted to reveal unlimited amounts of their games. But regardless, I want to preserve my experience, and so that means no more Monster Hunter Wilds for me until the game comes out. Comment your thoughts down below about what you're most looking forward to from Wilds, as well as anything you have to say about your perspective on spoilers. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe. Happy hunting.